Ronald, you have a very strong background in the financial sector, asset management, deposit trading. As far as I understood, can you tell us something about your experiences? For how long did you work there?
Well, my experiences are more complicated than what you mentioned just now. Actually, I have been an entrepreneur my entire life. Independence being the key component to me. I have once tried being an employee, but that didn't work out. Being an entrepreneur, I have seen many sectors, amongst which I have experienced the financial world. All my other companies as an entrepreneur, like my own fashion line for ladies, car dealership and also import-export, had me involved to such an extent with building up my own fortune. It inherently guided me into the world of finance. Working in import-export, you encounter different currencies and you have to go to the exchange to trade through brokers. And one of the brokers said at some point, "Ronald, I've been looking at your life for a long time and you are always busy. You earn money, we know, but what is your goal?" And I replied, "The only goal I have as an entrepreneur is to earn as much money as I possibly can. Because, the more money I have, the quicker I can retire, be free and of course have status. Basically everything you want in this society, or at least, that's what I thought back then." So the broker said, "In that case, stop what you are doing now, stop with all those companies and just start dealing money, go into the financial world." And that is the beginning of that situation that is connected to your original question. The broker had a place in the exchange market and he dealt in currencies, deposits, so trading in assets to make money out of differences in interest rates, and that involved the aforementioned asset management. Those three aspects together formed the interested package I said yes to. He said, "All right, you can take my place here, I'll train you, introduce you into the network, but in exchange I want 10% of your annual earnings." So he basically sold me his spot in the financial world and asked a 10% commission, which I paid him. I said, "Yes, fine with me." Then he replied, "There is one thing you need to know, if you can't put your conscience in the proverbial freezer, and I don't mean on -18 degrees, but on -100 degrees, then don't get involved in this." That was the message. You want a lot of money, you can obtain that, I can help you, but it comes at a great cost. Because you cannot do this with a clear conscience. Well, I laughed at that. I was young and naive. From my youth, from the way I came into life, my far from ideal youth led me to develop a certain view of the world and humanity.
What do you mean by that? No warm, loving family?
My mother always did the best she could to make us feel loved. But she was hampered by that due to the behavior of my father, who caused us to feel more like we lived in a war zone with each other. That isn't an exemplary situation to grow up in. And as a child growing up like that, led me to believe that the world and humanity are far from great.
So putting your conscience in the freezer was fitting in as a starting point?
I was partially already used to doing that out of self-preservation. So to put my conscience in the freezer was not an impossible task to me.
So it became a survival mechanism to you?
Yes, yes. And my view of humanity and the world around me wasn't exactly positive either. I only thought of myself, that the way I grew up to be out of self-preservation, and I got into that deal. which meant that slowly I built up a customer base. And as I improved my skills within the network, I got deeper into the financial world. And then it turns out the world is really small, and you keep noticing that. Even when I was still working in import-export, dealing in grain and such, you notice it is just a small circle. And if we talk about the hardcore circle in the financial world, I don't mean Miss Jean at the bank, but the big global flows of money which you use for trading.
De grote geldstromen die op aarde rondgaan, waar je mee gaat handelen.
You are talking about worldwide cash flows, so not the Netherlands in particular where you started working?
The Netherlands do play a distinct part in this story, but the world does not revolve around it.
Nederland is niet het centrum van de aarde.
The Netherlands are a part of a large global financial system, in which you work through exchange mark if you want to do official transactions.
Als je officiële transacties wil doen, kan je dat via beurs doen. En heel veel banken,
and many banks, who do the currency
de
exchange,
geldwisselaars zijn,
get certain assignments from clients, which they can't get away with easily.
moeilijk mee weg kunnen.
Then the need arises for people like me, who were the straw men where big money flows are involved.
Je kan ook zeggen de loopjongen van het grote geld.
We used certain financial constructions, international legislation, to move money in such a way making everything okay.
Het geld zo gaan bewegen dat het allemaal oké is.
So all supervisors, regulatory bodies that are in place worldwide, because they are. That no one wakes up seeing what is going on, like a year or two ago, with the scandal around Panama.
The Panama Papers.
Yes.
Tax evasion.
I think, well, it was about avoiding taxes. Tax evasion is when you break all the rules. This had to do with avoiding. But when you see what happened there, I'm like, guys, that is old news. And who are you bring with that, because it is peanuts and hardly relevant. However, for the common people, that is great news, but it is not anything big, but it does show there is something very wrong in this world. For example, there are people in the Netherlands, with certain positions, who have bank accounts in Panama, with legislation that allows them not to pay taxes in the Netherlands, which is completely legal. Constructions like that were part of my job. When we had to change currency, we had changes, the first boycotts in Iraq in the early 90s. When there was a boycott in Iraq because of the war that started there. And we were confronted with what we called Iraqi dollar. Iraqi dollars, which were actually American dollars. The American dollar has a direct relation to the oil prices, which made it a world trading currency backed up by oil. As long as that connection is in place, the dollar has a value. Officially, the Iraqi people weren't allowed to sell their oil due to the boycott. In theory, that is, because never before there was such a big business in oil. With discounts in this case, because officially it wasn't allowed, so with discounts it still crossed the borders. These dollars, because the energy was always paid in the dollars, so the Iraqi dollars had to go somewhere. You couldn't just take them to the desk at the bank because of all the regulations and checks did provide a certain protection. Because money laundering and criminality wasn't anything new back then, now we call it terrorism. But that was then also the case. So, then you need people to take the heat. As straw men, you got invited to a bank, for example, in Germany's, with basements full of trucks filled with money. And then you think, sure. trucks, transports. A busy company. Come with me, then they show you they are all filled to maximum capacity with dollars. And they tell you we need to get rid of all this cash. So change them pounds, German marks, this, that, in such way, and it needs to go there and there.
Are we now talking about money laundering?
Well, processing cash. Processing cash in such a way that we can legally reintroduce it into the money circuit.
So that was your task?
That was an assignment my colleagues and I got. You are never alone on an assignment, because you cannot do this on your own. It is not possible. We all know Scrooge McDuck scooping money with his shovel. Well, we literally had to do that over there. It was impossible to process all at once. So, then you need to find a way. Cash used to be the predominant way of paying, where nowadays most is digital. But you tried to find a way to process the cash. How do you reintroduce the cash into the circuit so Iraq can deal in its oil without being hampered? Because they are the ones that own the money. Iraq doesn't want. Look, you mentioned money laundering, but what it was about the boycott, Iraq had to stick to the rules, and buy, everything you want to know about the world. You can know by following the money. That is the bottom line. Everyone can say blah, 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 but make sure you follow the money, then you'll find the truth. Same thing goes for that situation. So the only thing Iraq and their buying partners wanted was to remain free of any accusations. Because the partners who bought it were the ones placing the boycott in the first place, but they are actually all friends on the same side. Everybody thinks there are opposites like good and bad guys in the world. But on the higher levels, it is just a game and they are all working together. However, they do have to stick to the rules and regulations they themselves have created to keep the rest of society suppressed and make sure that it will not be too crowded at the top. So you have to play by your own rules. So what is going on there is to make sure that nobody can trace you, apart from the elite themselves. Nobody in lower ranks can find out what really happened.
Compartmentalized, that's how we call it.
Yes.
Everyone knows only his own little piece. Only the elite knows what is happening.
Yes, but because we were doing the dirty work, we had to know a lot. Because we couldn't afford to make any mistakes.
How high in the pyramid did you get? Were you close to the top of the pyramid?
Well, we were communicating with them. My ego would have loved it when I got to this position of belonging to the top itself. Nowadays we still talk about 8,000 to 8,500 people in the world who run the entire world. It would have been amazing to get into such a position back then.
All right, but if we say the top knows 100%, can you estimate how much you knew and understood of what happened?
In my work, I had to know 100% of what was going on. There was no other way, because of the interests of the people involved were huge. Especially for the top. If I wouldn't know all the details, I would end up making mistakes. Which would cause a spin-off, because those mistakes would be detected. Then the people that don't know anything about it would interfere. We are talking about having nerves of steel to function at this level.
So did you have nerves of steel?
Yes, it worked just fine.
The freezer worked very well for you.
Yes, I played at the highest level for about 5 years. And then it was totally over, out and done with. That was a very intense moment for me.
That happened suddenly?
Well, no, the thing is, I gave a small example of what was involved.
binnen die handel speelde. Dus dat ging
So,
dus in dit
in
geval
this
om de
case,
omwisseling
currency
van
exchange,
valuta's,
dollar to
door
something
te
else,
veranderen. Het ging erom
deposited
dat
in a
het
safe
veilig werd
manner,
weggezet, deposito's. En het
and
ging erom dat het
managing
vermogen
assets
goed werd
well,
beheerd.
so it
Dus
could
dat
grow to
betekent
rate of
ook,
return, leading to
dat er
reinvestments with the
mensen
money.
meer investeringen konden gedaan worden met het geld. Het
The
niveau
level I
waarop
played
die
it in
5
those
jaar ging
5
spelen,
years. And that didn't
noodzaakelijk
happen
leverde
overnight,
elke dag, je
you
moest
need to
scoren.
earn your
En
place.
ik had,
I am skilled at connecting the
had ik
dots,
uitgaven
information
om
in
heel
order to
snel,
achieve
zeg
a
maar,
full
allemaal
picture of all the
losstaande
things
deeltjes,
involved.
informaties op een bepaalde manier met elkaar te combineren. Waardoor
That
ik
need to be
totaal
taken into
overzicht
account
krijg
within the
van
playing
waar ik allemaal
field,
rekening mee moet houden binnen het speelveld. Dus
which
heel
is a very
zelf
detailed
gedefinieerd.
process.
En
You
dat
stand
valt
out
op
when you are gifted
als
in
je die
this.
fase hebt.
This is the reason I
Daarom
was
kan ik ook
trusted
zeggen,
with the full
mij werd gewoon
100% of the
100%
information
gegeven
where it
op mijn
concerned my
werkveld, op
jobs.
mijn gebied.
So,
Is niet
I didn't
alles
know
wat
about
er
everything they
gebeurde.
knew,
Ik wist
but
alles
everything
wat
that
er
I needed to
deed.
know regarding the
En
case I was
100%
working
van
with
de zaken die
colleagues.
ik moest
I was
draaien
often
met
put in the
collega's.
leading
Daar had
role,
ik een
because I
vaste
kept a
leiding
good
in die ik heel
overview of the
snel alles
situation.
overzag.
You're good at making quick switches.
Ja, en ik kon ook de
Yes,
innovatie
and I was
er nog
good at
in gooien
innovative
van
thinking
hoe
to
los je
solve
het
the
dan op.
problem.
Ik
I had
vond dat
fun
leuk. Ik vond het
creating
leuk om te
solutions in
stimuleren
such a
op een
way
manier dat
to
je alles en
always
iedereen
stay
een
ahead
beetje
and
af was,
outsmart
slim af
them,
was.
staying
Kon
within the
spelen met
rules
al
of the
die
game
regels
but
en
playing
het
around
allemaal
with them to make
opvolgen.
everything
Dat vond ik een
match
heel
up.
leuk spel.
I
Maar
love
aan de
that
andere
game.
kant heeft het mij
However,
heel hoog
on the other
verantwoord.
hand, you had
En
a
ik kreeg
great
steeds
amount
meer
of
te weten over de
responsibility and
werkelijke
you learned
wereld.
more and more about the real
In de
world,
financiële
since
wereld.
through the financial world you learn all of the actual truth.
So you say all. In what
Je
regard?
klanten,
Well,
je
your
klanten, aan je
clients give you
klanten kon je,
glimpses of how the
heel
world really
duidelijk een
works.
wereld ontdekken, hoe die in elkaar
In
zat.
hindsight,
Achteraf
I still
gezien wist ik
didn't
nog
know
steeds niet
everything.
alles.
But I did
Maar ik
know a
wist al wel
lot.
veel.
Because
Want
my
die klanten
clients
waren
were
beharker.
banks who didn't
Die
want
wilden de
blood on their
bankrekening
hands.
schoonhouden.
But within those
Maar binnen
banks
zo'n
there
bank
always
zitten
is a
een aantal
number of
mensen die
people
weten
who
precies
know
wat er
damn
allemaal
well what
speelt.
is going
Dus
on.
zeg
So,
maar,
like
1%
1% within a
bank
bank
weet
knows
precies
the
wat er
truth of the
werkelijk
matter
speelt in de
regarding the
wereld. Dat
happenings
wel
within the
met
world,
te
which
maken
is
met
not
geld.
surprising,
Maar dat zijn je
considering
klanten.
they are
Maar je hebt
involved in
ook
the flows
uiteindelijk
of
met
money.
overheden te
Those are
maken.
your
Je hebt te
clients.
maken
You
met
also have
multinationals.
governments to deal
Je hebt
with,
te maken met
multinationals.
geheime diensten.
You have to deal with secret
Maar je hebt ook te
services,
maken
and
met
what
wat
they
ze
now
noemen
call
terroristische
terrorist
organisaties.
organizations.
Je krijgt dus
You get all
het
of the
hele
groups that are
palet
involved
van
with the big
groot
money as
geld
clients.
aan
Then you
cliënteel.
start
Want dan
seeing
zie
the
je ook de
connections.
verbindingen.
So,
Hè?
they
Dat
might be
staat dan los van elkaar
compartmentalized
in
as
het
you
cijfer,
just
je weet een
mentioned,
deel. Maar jij
regarding
zit er middenin, dus
knowledge.
jij
But
ziet
because
steeds
I
meer
am in the
van,
middle,
oh,
I
nu
see
komt
how
het
they
van dit
relate
en dan
to
gaat het
another.
naar daar
You
en
see
komt
the
het
money
daar,
coming
gaat
from
naar daar.
this place,
Je
then going to that
krijgt steeds meer
place,
informatie en
etc. You keep
overzicht over
gaining
wat er werkelijk
information and
speelt.
thereby an overview of what is really going on.
So do you have to serve and keep all of those groups happy, including terrorist organizations? You were trying to keep everybody happy?
Yes,
Ja,
My God.
that was
je
my
werk.
job.
Keeping all the balls in the air.
Ja.
Yes,
En wat
indeed.
wat een
So
van de
one of
dingen
the
waar
things
voor
that I
mij de werk
found
over
out,
ging,
I did not
dat ik
know
toen
that
eerst niet
before,
wist,
but
maar
now
nu
am I
wel.
do, is about
Is bijvoorbeeld
secret
geheime diensten. Je
services.
denkt dan van
You
geheime
think
diensten
they are
zijn
there
van
to
bang
serve
voor
and
het land
protect a
en voor een
people,
volk
country,
enzovoorts
etc.,
enzovoort.
but they actually turn out
Maar
to
dan
be the
blijken dat
criminal
eigenlijk wat
organizations,
ze nu
to be
noemen
more
criminele
precise. The
organisaties
system is
zijn.
heavily
Want
so.
het systeem is zwaar crimineel.
We are talking
Het
about
gaat over
financing
het
wars,
financieren
creating
van
wars,
oorlogen,
so
het
basically
creëren van
creating a lot of
oorlogen, het
misery in
creëren
this
van eigenlijk
world.
heel veel ellende in deze wereld. Hè, dus ook
So,
heel veel strijd.
lots of conflict.
En dan denk ik
And
van,
then I think
jeetje,
to
de
myself,
mensen
if
moeten
only
weten
people
hoe die
knew
wereld
what the
werkelijk
world
in
is
elkaar
really
zit.
like.
Voor die
Secret services
diensten
will stop at
is niets te
nothing.
dol. Niets.
Nothing. But they also
Maar
have their
ook, we hebben
flows of
weer met
money,
geldstromen,
because if
want
they
als
are
hun
trading
in
in
de handel van
drugs or
drugs zitten,
weapons
of in de
or,
handel van
for that
wapens, of in de
matter,
handel
people.
van, noem het maar op, mensen.
All
dat
that
geld
money
moet
has to
ergens
go
naartoe.
somewhere.
Alles moet
Everything has
gefinancierd
to be
worden.
financed.
You say if, but you could confirm they are doing this?
Allemaal.
All of them? All of them? So the
Dus de
entire
hele
world as we
wereld
think we know
is
it,
niet
is
de
just an
wereld
illusion we
van
believe
waar we
in,
allemaal van denken dat de wereld is zoals die is.
which
kom
is
je dus
something
achter
you
door het
find
werk.
out in this line of
Waar
work
bij
and
mij
where
dus,
it all went wrong for me,
misging,
to put it that
om zo
way.
te zeggen.
Right. You mean, finally that is.
Achteraf gezien
In
is het maar goed
hindsight,
geweest,
yes,
maar,
it was for the best, but
ik kreeg
my freezer started to
stroomstoringen op die
malfunction. There were things happening. For example, I went to a different trade market and one of my colleagues there said, "Ronald, you remember that case with the Italian lira? I sometimes mention that during talks as well. Do you remember those deals, in which we did massive dumping of the lira, which reduced the value of the currency? Which caused a company in Italy to be hit in such a way, they went bankrupt." And then you hear at the exchange, "You remember that successful deal with the lira?" Yes. And then they say, "Did you know that the owner committed suicide and left a family behind?" Things like that. And back then we laughed at it. Altogether, all of us. We looked down on people, mocked them. It was just a product, waste. Everything was worthless trash. Nature, the planet, everything could burn and break.
Just useless parasites.
Just as long as we met our goals, as long as we were growing. Many of my colleagues ended up drinking or using drugs. Not me. Maybe I should have.
Or not.
No, in hindsight, it was for the best and I'm happy to still be alive. However, all those horrible things started to eat at me.
Can you give an example? Because I can sense a lot of terrible things happen to you.
Yes. It is difficult for me to talk about.
I can feel that, but only whatever you wish to share is all right.
Yes. I only talk about things I want to tell. But it does evoke lots of emotions, and with my conscience not being in the freezer, it touches me deeply.
Yes, I feel the same way. All right. Can you tell me the worst thing that has happened that caused the tipping point in your situation?
Well, that was the beginning of the end. You get so deep into these circles. And you sign a lifetime contract, not with blood or anything, to never disclose names of companies, organizations or people. I think that is why I am still alive. You have to stick to it. If we are talking about the worst things that I have experienced, I just told you about things that made the freezer glitch. My conscience started to show itself. Let's put it this way. I was training to become a psychopath and I failed. I did not complete the training and didn't become a psychopath. My conscience came back, and the most difficult part for me was, because I had such a great status there, I was a success. I was trusted with the people playing at this level.
Mensen in deze wereld die dus op dat niveau speelden.
To put it carefully, most of these people followed a not very mainstream religion. So, you have Catholics, Protestants, all sorts of religions. These people, most of them, were Luciferians. And then you can say, religion is a fairy tale, God doesn't exist. None of that is real. Well, for these people, it is truth and reality. And they served something immaterial, what they called Lucifer. And I also was in contact with those circles, only I laughed at it because to me they were just clients. So, I went to places called churches of Satan.
So now we are talking about Satanism.
Yes. So, I visited these churches, just as a visitor, dropped by. And then they were doing their holy mass with naked women and liquor and stuff. And it just amused me. I didn't believe in any of this stuff, and was far from convinced if any of this was real.
It was just a spectacle to you.
Yes. In my opinion, the darkness and evil is within the people themselves. I didn't make the connection yet. So I was a guest in those circles, and it amused me greatly to see all those named women and the other things. It was the good life. But then at some point, I was invited, which is why I'm telling you all this, to participate in sacrifices abroad. That was the breaking point. Children.
You were asked to do that?
Yes. And I couldn't do that.
Would you like to stop for a moment, by the way?
No. And then I started to slowly break down. I lived through quite a lot as a child myself, and this really touched me deeply. Everything changed. But that is the world I found myself in. And then I started to refuse assignments within my job. I could no longer do it, which made me a threat. I was no longer capable of functioning optimally. My performance started to shake and I had refused tasks. I had not participated. The purpose of the whole thing, eventually, in that world, is that they have everybody in their pocket. You need to be susceptible to blackmail. And blackmailing me proved to be very hard if I look back on it. They wanted to do that through those children. And that broke me.
Is that, you are not telling me something new, what they also do in politics?
If you Google this, you'll find enough worldwide witness accounts to know this isn't a Walt Disney fairy tale. Unfortunately, the truth is that worldwide they have been doing this for thousands of years. I once studied theology, and even in the Bible you find references to these practices with Israelites. The reason the first 10 tribes were banished to Babylonia was because of these rituals with children, including the sacrificing of children. So this is pertinent. All this made me believe, because I realized there was more to life than meets the eye. There is a whole invisible world. It is real. You really do talk about a dark force and a manifestation of light. So, I resorted to studying theology to make sense of it all.
And psychology as well, if I remember correctly?
Yes, but that I did in my first life, because through commercial psychology, mass psychology, I was able to manipulate situations for my own benefit.
That is scary, because if you dig into that you find Tavistock Institute and mind control, MK Ultra, Monarch and the like.
Yes, that is correct, but that was all part of the job. Through training at the job, I got into that more deeply, because when you are making deals, you also need to manipulate the media. You have to manipulate lots of things because nothing can be seen as it is. Everything has to appear to be something different. You see the people as a flock of sheep. You put a couple of border collies and drive them in a direction. And to be honest with you, I still see that happening around me. People are still, through the systems and methods that we ourselves used to use, being treated in that same way, and it still works. People still don't understand how it really works and are still on the level of as long as I have my beer and whatever, completely self-absorbed, also a survival mechanism. I mean, it is the program after all. But you still see how stupidly easy it is to put people in a certain direction, when you are the one pulling the strings, that is.
Mass psychology.
Yes, and later, much later, in all those studies and discoveries, I found a document which they are claiming is bullshit, of course, the Protocols of Zion. And nowadays I recommend everyone to read the whole of that incredibly boring document. Just work through it, read it though.
We are also talking about Zionism.
Yes, of course. If you read the Protocols of Zion and really study them and understand, then it is like reading the newspaper of the daily life. How from their position of ultimate power, and ultimate it has literally become, But that is only because the people don't stand up for themselves. They don't realize what reality is.
And we have all been programmed. If you dare to say you are against Zionism, then you are branded an anti-Semite.
The negative, you can say evil, the Luciferians, the Satanists, whatever you wish to call it, it is a real entity. I have found that what is written in the Bible, and not just the Bible, you can find it in so many books. There really has been a moment of separation from the manifestation of light, in which a group went their own way and are carrying an intense hatred, anger. The people who do not underestimate the severity of this are but few. Because this is an all-annihilating force that hates our guts. It hates creation. It hates life. And it will do anything to destroy us completely. And the way to do that is to divide humanity. Divide and conquer is their truth. Humanity is a manifestation of light. That is the true creation. As long as you divide them based on political parties, skin color, you name it, then you, from a Luciferian point of view that is, suppress the full capacities of your enemy, their full power. They can't stand up for themselves. Because if that would happen, the Luciferians would lose. Then this monster, the greedy monster, would disappear. I tell people about this old American general who puts an entire room of people in the dark. The eyes adapt to the darkness, but you can't see a thing. The general doesn't say a word and suddenly he flicks on a lighter, one little light. And due to the prolonged darkness, you experience a manifestation of light from a single point and everyone can slightly see each other again. And then he says, that is the power of our light.
Beautiful.
Unite. Unite. Come together. And this entire shit story ceases to exist. That's how fast it could happen. But that is easy for me to say now. But then I was in a period of my life in which I was crumbling down.
Could you tell us something specific about that? How did that happen? Because you were invited.
I started to refuse assignments. My conscience came back after the request involving the children and I started to refuse more and more. I had a conscience and I couldn't function anymore.
But you did still show up at work after that?
I didn't really have a choice. I had my own business with several offices and employees. Everything was still rolling.
It must have been hard.
Yes, it got very hard, all the tensions. So, on the one hand you are playing with money on a high level, in which you can't afford to make mistakes. Otherwise everything falls down at once. Your entire business is ruined, everybody involved, including yourself. Then you are really screwed. So that brings a lot of stress, factoring in the resurfacing of a conscience. I was warned off when I got into this. Don't do it if you can't put your conscience at minus 100 degrees in the freezer.
And you probably realized that then?
Yes, I heard myself laugh at it back then, but it wasn't a joke at all. I totally did not understand where I really got into.
And your proverbial freezer was switched off?
Broken. I couldn't do it anymore. So, I tried to work through it, keep up appearances. I didn't know how to get out of this. I was trapped as well. Everybody was trapped. This all led me to crash completely eventually. My body just simply stopped. The first thing I saw was my mother crying at the intensive care.
You ended up at the IC?
Yeah, I really shut down.
You had literally crashed?
Yes. Yes. At that time I didn't believe in anything, not I can still recall how I saw, From that corner, I was looking down upon myself. I saw how they were working on me.
You had a near-death experience.
Well, you could call it that. I have seen I am not my body. I'm in my body. But I am not just my body. I have seen them working on me. And later on, I've been reluctant to talk about it for a long time. I really talked about it much later. But when I did, I had researched so many things already and started to believe. I was starting to better understand the spiritual and the material. At that point, this intense experience got its own place. The realization that I'm not my body. It's just a vessel. So, I lived through all of that, but I also needed a long time to recover.
Yes, of course.
Yes, I was a train wreck. Complete wreck. I was completely burned out. I had crashed and the body needed a year to recover. Because I don't really want to get into it now, but in those circles, I got tortured physically during my exit time. This was in order to make sure I would never break the contract of secrecy. So, I was taken for a certain amount of time. I was treated. All those factors together just increased the stress I was experiencing. Literally running full speed towards my own end.
Do you mean abductions, as well call it, or programming?
No. They exposed me to certain types of torture. That makes sure you'll never damage anyone in that world. I didn't realize that back then, so this is all from hindsight. It did all happen that way. So the end of my first life was so extreme that I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't handle it anymore, in no way. However, my mind power was so strong that it only happened within to my own body. That was, well, I didn't know what to do anymore. There were no options left for me. So that is why sometimes I think, of course that is not true, but I wish, like so many colleagues, I had taken the drugs and alcohol route. At least my end would have been more gentle, because most of them are just dead by now. Even though I know there are more strawmen walking around, there are little still alive whom I knew back then. Most of them are already gone. Well, I was dead too, but I'm still here.
So, you still have something left to do.
Yes. I suppose you could say that, but that is, I can't say in short, since I don't know how long we have been talking, the world that I found myself in. If you have any specific questions, then I can answer them, but I had hoped to be more concise, but I just don't know how.
Well, you have my gratitude for all you have shared.
To me, it is still a very big deal.
The Bible's viewpoint. Satan. Is Satan a real person? The original serpent, the one called devil and Satan, is misleading the entire inhabited earth. Revelation 12:9. What people say. Some believe that Satan the devil is not a person, but rather the abstract quality of evil that exists inside each person. What the Bible says. Satan is a real person. He is a rebel angel, a spirit creature who opposes God. The Bible calls Satan the ruler of this world. John 12:31. He uses lying signs and deception to accomplish his aims. 2 Thessalonians 2:9 and 10. The Bible records a conversation in heaven between Satan and God. If Satan were a mere symbol of the evil that exists inside each person, how could God, who is perfect and morally unblemished, have been talking to an evil part of himself? Clearly, Satan is a real person and not merely a personification of evil. Why should it matter to you? Satan's reasons for wanting you to believe that he is fictitious are similar to those of a criminal who hides his identity so that he may continue to break the law undetected. To protect yourself against Satan, you first need to acknowledge that he exists. Where does Satan live? Woe for the earth, because the devil has come down to you. Revelation 12:12. What people say. Many believe that Satan resides in a fiery hell at the center of the earth. Others feel that he exists inside bad people. What the Bible says. Satan is a spirit creature, so he lives in an invisible realm. For a time, Satan was allowed to move about at will where God and the faithful angels reside. Now, however, he has been evicted from God's presence and, along with other wicked spirit creatures, is confined to the vicinity of the earth. Does this mean that Satan is limited to one specific place on earth? For example, you may have read that the ancient city of Pergamum was said to be where Satan is dwelling. Revelation 2:13. Actually, that expression alluded to the concentration of satanic worship there. Satan does not call any one physical place on earth home. Instead, the Bible says that all the kingdoms of the inhabited earth are his. Luke 4:5 and 6. Can Satan harm or control people? The whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one. 1 John 5:19. What the Bible says. Most of mankind have yielded to Satan's misleading influence and have thus come under his power. This fact helps explain why humans have been unable to improve world conditions. The Bible also records more extreme cases, in which Satan or other rebel angels have taken control of people and caused them physical harm. What you can do. You need not dread Satan's power. To avoid coming under Satan's influence or control, you need to learn how he manipulates people, so that you are not ignorant of his designs. 2 Corinthians 2:11. By reading the Bible, you can obtain vital knowledge of Satan's tactics and thus avoid becoming a victim. Get rid of any paraphernalia associated with demon activity. That includes amulets, printed matter, videos, music, and computer applications that promote spiritism or divination. Oppose the devil, says the Bible, and he will flee from you. James 4:7. By obeying the Bible's wise counsel, you can protect yourself against Satan's evil machinations.
Near-death experiences. What do they not mean? The Bible's answer. Many people who have come close to dying say that they recall being separated from their body, or seeing a bright light or a place of great beauty. Some consider the experience to be a privileged glimpse of another realm of existence, states the book Recollections of Death. Although the Bible doesn't mention such near-death experiences, it does contain a fundamental truth that shows that they are not visions of the next life. The dead are unconscious. The Bible says that the dead are conscious of nothing at all. Ecclesiastes 9:5. At death we pass not into another plane of existence or thinking, but into non-existence. The teaching that we have an immortal soul that survives after our body dies does not come from the Bible. Thus, any memories from a near-death experience cannot be glimpses of heaven, hell, or the afterlife. What did Lazarus say about an afterlife? The Bible's account of Lazarus describes an actual death experience. He was resurrected by Jesus after being dead for 4 days. If Lazarus had been enjoying some form of afterlife, it would have been cruel of Jesus to bring him back to life on earth. However, the Bible records no comments from Lazarus about the afterlife. Surely Lazarus would have spoken about his afterlife experience if he had had one. Significantly, Jesus described Lazarus' death as being like sleep, indicating that while Lazarus was dead, he was conscious of nothing at all.
People think the Bible says that God controls the world. But how could that be? This world is out of control. It's full of pain and suffering, sickness and death, poverty and disaster. How could a loving God be responsible for all of this? What the Bible says may surprise you. It says, the evil one controls the whole world. In other words, there's an evil power behind the world's problems. Someone who is pulling the strings behind the scenes. That's why, no matter how hard we try, humans just cannot solve the world's problems. The good news is, the Bible says things will not always be like this. It tells us why we're in this situation, how God will fix it, and how we can deal with it in the meantime. The Bible is providing answers to life's big questions for millions of people around the world. Would you like to be one of them? Jehovah's Witnesses would be happy to study the Bible with you. Fill in the online request for a Bible study, and a witness in your area will call to discuss the Bible at a time and place convenient for you.